Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session of the second USAf CHE conference. Very, very pleased to welcome you all to this session. And this is a session which has been put together by the Council on Higher Education, and I'm very pleased to be chairing it for two reasons. The one is that it shows that this is a real partnership between the CHE and USAf. But secondly, it's also an opportunity for us to explore a really important issue, an issue which kind of has to do with reimagining our universities as engaged institutions, and of course the challenge of thinking about models that allow our institutions to be engaged institutions. One of those models is the idea of anchor institutions, our universities as anchor institutions. One of the interesting things about universities is that they exist in locations. They are contextually located, and and unlike kind of businesses and NGOs and so on, they can't simply sort of pick up and leave, right? So they have a permanent footprint in their locations, in their context. And in a sense, that makes them anchor institutions. So that's where the term comes from. And I think that we have three wonderful speakers today. Professor Sibusiso Moyo at Durban University of Technology, Professor Nthabiseng Ogude, University of Pretoria, and then Mr. Larry Pokpas at the University of Western Cape, and I'll introduce each of them as I introduce as they come on to speak. So thank you very much, and I hope that there's a lot of discussion and so on following the inputs. Please do put in your questions in the chat so that we can pick them up. But let me begin now by asking Professor Sibusiso Moyo to switch on her camera so that she can be seen. And Professor Moyo is Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and I just have to remind myself. She's innovation is and engagement at Durban University of Technology. She has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Natal, and a master's in tertiary education management from the L.H. Martin Institute at the University of Melbourne, Australia. She has published in the mathematical sciences, and her focus is on differential equations and optimization problems. And I've worked very closely with her. She was head of research at Durban University of Technology when I was Vice-Chancellor there. And very, very pleased to welcome her to this session. And I want to just also indicate that she holds the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship and was a co-applicant on the Higher Education Reform Experts South Africa project, which was awarded to the Technological Higher Education Network of South Africa, TENSA. And with that, I'm going to ask Professor Moyo to come in and do her presentation, and then we'll go on to the others. Thank you so much, Professor Moyo.
Thank you so much, Prof. Bawa. It's always a pleasure to be part of these sessions, and thank you so much. It's not so easy to have your boss, former boss, and following you around. So, but thank you so much for all, for the invitation. I want to also thank, the Council of Higher Education and Dr. Witty Green, who also helped to organize this, and all the organizers. Also just rely on all the protocols that were done yesterday, so I observed all protocol. So today, what I was asked to really talk about was the case study of Durban University of Technology in terms of understanding what it means to have these engaged universities as anchor institutions. And we've only been given really 20 minutes. I think my screen is sort of frozen now. So what I want to do is maybe to just, start off by, and I think Prof. Bawa, you've just touched on what an anchor is, anchor institution, because I was looking more, example of a ship. If you want the ship to stop, to be still, so that you're certain about what's going to happen, you actually anchor it so that it doesn't move around so easily. But for the sake of this presentation, of course, we will define an engaged anchor university as a university that is well integrated within its local, regional, and local context. I call it local because in our strategy, we refer to the local and global because to some extent, we also have to respond to those changes. And then also what is important to understand is that when we use the two terms, engagement and being an anchored institution, on the engagement side, what we know is that as universities, even as DUT, we normally would engage with our Quad Helix partners. So we break those mainly into the government and its entities. Then there's the business and industry sector, civil society, and then other higher education institutions, which would both be local or international. And in the civil society, where you have NGOs, NPOs, and alumni, who are former students, become part of civil society, they become part of society. So that engagement with alumni also is very important for us to just remember. I thought just as a case study and for the benefit of colleagues who may never have been at the university, so Durban University of Technology is one of the 26 public higher education institutions. It is located in KZN. And we are based in, mainly we have our campuses in Durban and in the Midlands, and we have 7 different delivery sites. Our student population is over 33,000 on the average annually. And out of that population, 95% of those students are undergraduate students and 5% are postgraduate students. We intend to grow our postgraduate numbers, but we are still sort of in that range. We have over 700 academics. I think this number might go down because recently we also tried to, introduce the fact that we need all our staff who are academics to have masters. So that number might have gone down a bit recently. And then the other indicators we look at, is publication per staff member, which is over 1 unit at the moment, and it is growing steadily. And then I thought that was an important point to just raise so that you have a context. So for us, our location is very important. And there's a difference, again, whether you talk about Durban and Midlands and what our strengths are, you can actually see that based on the region where we are, those differences come in. And then why is it important for us, to talk about being engaged and anchored? So the physical location is important, the visibility and the presence in an area. And then also the contribution to socio-economic development. And for the economists, you can look at this in different ways. The universities contribute to the economy in terms of, for example, we train a lot of people whom we put outside there, after graduation. And then also our budgets, where the university budget, if you look where you are located, you have to spend that budget in your region. So our contribution to our local economy can also be counted in terms of the budgets that we spend, in terms of the procuring of services in our region, whom we procure from, how accessible that is to people within your region. And you've seen that in some cases, and KZN is quite interesting, because when it comes, for example, in the construction industry, you almost in some areas, you still have to negotiate before you start putting up your building, So there are all this complexity, there's the political part and so forth. So that contribution to social development of a region and economic development is important. And then also, our key, area is around contributing knowledge and being able to translate that to products, services, goods and services for an area. So that is important for us, and also contributing to improving the quality of life in the region, wherever you are, dealing with real issues. And the last bullet there, I talked about raising friends of the university, because we heard yesterday, for example, that if we as universities, as a sector, cannot have people who can empathize and sympathize and support us, then I think that it becomes a very problematic area. When people are looting the university, when people are attacking the universities, nobody is able to speak out. So we need to be able to bring in that aspect as well. So for DUT, we use what we use really to guide us in terms of how we engage and whom we engage with is our strategy. It's called Envision 2030. And there we normally ask ourselves the usual questions, where are we? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? But the key part is around impact. So I will talk just a few minutes about that. So we are interested in the impact, and the impact is not just in terms of the socio-economic impact, but we also want to know, in terms of how are we transforming the lives of the local people, and what is it that we are really doing with the society together in terms of setting our research agenda, our teaching and learning agenda, and in order to have a higher impact and transform those that we interact with and work with. Because mainly at DUT, most of its undergraduate students come from rural KZN. So, that also makes a big difference in terms of what is it that we're supposed to be doing. Our strategy is a one-page map like this. So you'll see on the left-hand side there, we have what we call perspective. So we normally start off with the stewardship and systems and processes, which is our, you read from the bottom. And those are enablers, which enable us to create an environment where we can, ensure that we, starting off with stewardship, we have the right values, we have the right institutional culture, we inspire creativity and innovation in everything that we do. And then we move on to systems and processes, which allow us to make sure that we can innovate in terms of our curricula, making sure we have a digital platform. And, with the COVID now, the pandemic, for example, we've had to move very fast in that area. And the inequality in that area also among students, and even, depending on where you are, some places there's no accessibility yet to networks and so forth. So that is a critical area as well. And of course, around infrastructure. And then sustainability and society, which we're talking about today. And you see under society at the top, which is for us is influencing and impacting. That's what it really does, is that's where we bring in the engaged university concept. And then we talk about two other objectives, which are about innovation and entrepreneurship, and then ensuring that our graduates are adaptive. So when we engage, we really want to know that it will be a mutually beneficial partnership, it will be a mutually beneficial engagement, just to make sure that we're addressing the key issues that we need to address as a university in that area. And I thought that it might be interesting to also see that, just from the research innovation side, some of the indicators we look at, how we engage, not just within our region, but also globally as well. And we've seen that a lot of our, collaborations are within, outside the continent. So in our engagement agenda, we have actually brought in, the concept of, it's not a concept, but I mean, it's a well-known concept, but we are focusing on Africa engagement, which is key for us because we believe that it will help our students. And, one of the areas that we focus on with our students, remember, is around entrepreneurship development and trying to make sure that they can adapt and work with people from different cultures. So for us, that's important. And so one of the areas, these ones here, they show, the data here shows, the papers that are published with other authors, but the African papers, even though they show 183, these ones are really students who are studying at the university, who have studied at the university between 2018 and 2020, and who have published with, in collaboration with DUT. So it's not real collaboration, but that's why that is important to mention. And I did hear yesterday, we were talking about impact. And for me, it's not just the obsession with rankings here. It's what is important here is that, rankings do give us to some extent, visibility, because I can say that for the first time for DUT, we when we got into these ranking tables, we started getting, offers of partnerships from universities that traditionally would not. So I think that to some extent we've become a bit visible, and I think one can use the advantage of visibility and also trying to see who are the key partners. So what is important again here is that, we want through our strategy to be able to measure impact. And what it has helped us with is that within these rankings, there's the impact rankings, which actually help you to measure your impact in terms of the SDGs. And for us, that has been important to use the rankings in order to see which measures we can use, for ourselves to make sure that we are also impacting our local communities and localizing those SDGs. Because remember, it's no poverty, no hunger, which also touches our communities, the same thing that we also experience, and we want to be able to measure that. So the impact rankings explore the impact that a university can make. And of course, this is important for us in terms of dealing with poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and justice, and we use that to our advantage. So nationally, we know that the problem we are trying to solve is really just making sure that we have programs that make sure our students become productive citizens and not a burden to society. And I believe that if we look in the last 2-3 years, that has changed quite a bit. I mean, the type of students and graduates we are beginning to see, we can see that there's some transformation taking place. And one of the programs we have here, I wanted to share about this Beauty School Engagement Program, which is an adopted, I mean, we adopt a number of schools in this. And what we try to do is quite a number of programs that are running at the university. They do not get credit for them, but some short courses, they do get credit. And we also link them up with our international partners where they're able to do some of the programs online, even though they are still in school. So there we have something like 17 schools that we're dealing with. But I wanted to really use that to highlight the fact that our current challenge really is around youth unemployment. And this is the problem we are trying to also deal with. The youth unemployment percentage is around 64.4%. I think this was the data that was collected up to around the second quarter. So which is quite high, I mean, for youth who are not really, doing any type of work. And so for us, what's important then is that, what can we do? Why should we be concerned? Why should we care? We know that we have to care because if we don't, then we'll have a chaotic situation, which we have experienced to some extent in terms of the looting that happened recently. So in our strategy, what we are saying really is that we want to make sure by 2030 that we're creative, our people, our students, our people, our staff, the people we interact with are creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial, adaptive to the changes of the world. I talked about that, and then participate productively in the development of our region, country, and then to make sure that we have the state-of-the-art infrastructure and systems that enhance the ecosystem. Here, ecosystem really talks to the collaboration that's needed. So we know we can't do this alone, we need to collaborate. So one of the things that we're doing, which has been helping us a lot, is also this concept of the Innovation Hub, where we've been able to bring along a number of partners whom we are working with, who are very interested to work with us to have a platform. And that what we are trying to do is that this plan is that we hope that this will be up in the next 5 years or so. The university has invested quite a bit on that. And then we have used our footprint, which shows that we've been able to develop entrepreneurs to date. It's a small number, 54 SMMEs out of we have over 33,000 students, and we know not all of them will become entrepreneurs, but this facility is going to be able to host up to 100 incubatees at any given time. And we are still exploring partnerships in that area. And we know that the hub is a place where you can bring, it's a physical space, but I mean, you can bring different stakeholders to a place, including our staff. Because what we know is that without the infrastructure, even our staff within the university don't know what's happening in the other corner of the university. So it's so much to say we are engaging outside, when inside the university itself, the people might not be engaging to the extent that they need to engage. So here I wanted to just flag our strengths. So depending on where we are, so in the Midlands campus, for example, we are really strong in the Agri-Hub area because of this location. So this is the area which we are really building up. And here we allow students to take programs where they can train. They don't have to have done agriculture. They can come from different fields. And we've got examples of students who've gone over to start off their own farms, at least 2 of them. It's a small number, but we are hoping to grow that area because some of the local government have also invested to just see that we grow our agribusiness as well. In Durban, the fashion and the technology area is also quite, an area which is also our strength, including the engineering. So what do you need to have in place, to be able to be anchored and to make sure that everybody's buying into that? So we've done a number of engagements within the university where we have had the engagement framework, which has been approved. We've got a research innovation blueprint that is in draft. And then there's also the this spin-off policy for commercialization, entrepreneurship policy, and a number on the curriculum. And we'll engage the Council on Higher Education on this one because it's going to be quite innovative. It's something we're trying to work on. We have this with the French Embassy. We've got a 3D experience platform in collaboration with CPUT, where we are trying to ensure that we expose our staff and train people to use the platform, especially in the engineering design. And they don't have to be mechanical engineers, but also the people in the arts and design. So you can design something and print it, which is just amazing. I think it's a great skill for our industry partners and those within the university as well. And then we are also partnering with a number of incubators, which are across the continent and the US as well, to just help to build that ecosystem. Location is important. Knowing the local priorities is important. And as you know, Durban is very good in the manufacturing area, is our strength. And then we've got the port as well, so it's those areas where we try to engage with our local government to make sure that we can contribute and strengthen our skills in that area and our programs that we can offer jointly. And then also just understanding the trends and what's happening where we are situated, understanding civil society, the role of university, and how we can create these vibrant communities is important. And I don't want to take long, but because if you know the local agenda, then you can set the research agenda as well to be able to deal with the key areas. So we have the water energy area, we've got the sustainable cities, and the Urban Future Center is our flagship program there, together with the green engineering. Then we've got the climate change area, which is it's a new area for DUT, but we're trying to build that up. And the smart grids, and I did talk about, we have a technology station as well, which contributes to this area as well. And we also look at the circular economy and sustainability. Then there's the digital technologies, which all talks to your 4IR. And our flagship there is the ICT and society. We host this conference every year, but it brings together different stakeholders. Students can participate, and different people within the university. And then also there is a sustainable social transformation and social education and development area where we bring in different stakeholders as well, including design thinking. I did talk about the 3D experience platform, which is in partnership with Dassault Systems, which is a French company. And in this area, again, we are collaborating with CPUT. So I didn't want to bring in quite a lot here. So one of the things we are doing as well with our partners is we have set up an incubator, which is going to be open and launched in the Midlands. And you're all welcome to join us. It will be done virtually as well. So we are going to open this up to allow for students to get incubated while they are still at the university, and hopefully to help them to be creative and start up their own enterprises as well. So that's one of the areas we're focusing currently. And I just wanted to show these students, some of the programs we run are not, these are not mainstream, but it's like extra programs the students can do. So this lady, she's in engineering, and with the ICRA Trust, which is one of our partners, one of the NGOs, they do this Keys to Excellence, and and you can see here, the student talks about the last remark which she makes about, I must adapt to a new technology. As I am a digital, she's not, she's still not a digital savvy. And she talks about, the appreciation that use excellence, remembering that not preparing is indeed a preparation for failure. And I think just the impact that these programs, you can do with partners that helps people beyond their field can really make a big difference. I wanted to sort of end with this quotation, which talks about, failure. There's only one thing that can make a dream impossible to achieve: the fear of failure, and that's by Paulo Coelho. I like the book on The Alchemist. There's quite a number of quotes which I find very useful there. So I wanted to just end by saying that, to summarize that in terms of being an anchor institution, so localization is important, understanding where we are located, understanding what the priorities of the area are, understanding who are the key players and who can come on board, and then also trying to, work out programs with other partners that could help the ecosystem, not just the university, the ecosystem, to make sure that we have the right partners, we have, supporters of the university, that our students have a better chance to succeed in what they're doing. That to some extent, the rankings can help you to measure impact, but I do understand about obsession, but I use more the impact ranking measures, which are very useful to understand how you can actually work out what are the key indicators that might be helpful to help you, localize those SDGs in your community, wherever you find them. So program director, I think I talked for almost 20 minutes. I was scared about the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sibu. And I think that you've painted a wonderful picture of just how much has been done at DUT, and just the extent to which DUT has become so integrated into, the big challenges facing Durban and KZN more generally, but also the nation, of course. Thank you very much for that. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions as we head into the next, towards the end of the session. I now really want to take this opportunity to introduce Professor Ogude. Nthabiseng is a science educator, and she's a professor and dean of the Mamelodi campus of the University of Pretoria. She kind of really leads the University of Pretoria's enterprise as in terms of UP being an anchor institution. As the minister said yesterday in his introduction, that the Hatfield would not have kind of been the condition it is in, had it not been for University of Pretoria. And that's because University of Pretoria has adopted a kind of an anchor institution approach. She obtained a PhD degree in chemistry education at University of Witwatersrand. And she has a long history in higher education. And at least 13 years in strategic leadership positions. She's passionate about student access and success and uses data-informed approaches for holistic development of students. In fact, we are both on the advisory board of Sibusiso, which is the student data project, which is run by SAIDI and which involves a whole range of our institutions. So, Professor Ogude, I want to hand over to you and really look forward to your input and the way in which University of Pretoria has begun to engage with this idea of being an anchor institution. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, my presentation today is going to be on a case study which we call the Mamelodi Collaborative. Is an anchor institution partnership between the University of Pretoria and Rutgers University Newark in New Jersey in the US. That is a snapshot aerial view of our campus. In terms of the overview, the idea is that the universities would work with respective communities in which they are anchored. University of Pretoria identified Hatfield and Mamelodi campuses as anchor campuses. These are representative of two diverse community UP serves in their immediate locality. And I just want to qualify here that my presentation is not going to look at the globe, UP is of course globally involved, is nationally involved, is continentally involved. I'm looking at the what we call hyperlocal engagement. Now coming back to the Newark community, if one is wondering to what extent it mirrors what we have here. When we went there, we found that it's like a blend of Mamelodi and Hatfield communities. We signed an MOU in 2017, and we started planning in we took 2 years to plan, and the planning grant was funded by the Cressy Foundation. I think a definition of anchor institution has been given, but there's an evolving discussion around anchor institutions. This is one of the definitions. An intentional deployment of an institution's geographically bound assets, academic capital, and economic power to revitalize neighborhoods where individuals face historic barriers to economic growth. This is just one definition, but it suits my focus today. Then the focus of our collaboration is in terms of the community. We would like to stem, in the ideal sense, the cycle of poverty in our respective communities by improving baseline community data matrix in specific niche areas. I will show you what kind of matrix I'm talking about. From the university side, of course, social responsiveness and to develop a research strategy, academic staff, student exchanges, and comparative collaborations, and then cooperative course development for postgraduate training in engaged research. We actually have a program with PhD students right now. 5 niche areas we identified in the planning: building strong educational pathways to tertiary studies. And we are both strong in this area, and it is my area of involvement. Science and the urban environment, strong, healthy, and safe neighborhoods, promoting, leveraging arts and culture, entrepreneurship, and economic development. And the idea is academic staff in various disciplines, students and communities work collaboratively in priority projects. Now, I want to focus on the educational pathways, as I said, is my area of expertise. We focused on the Mamelodi educational ecosystem, and it's very important, I emphasize again, a hyper-local engagement, almost like a systematic way of starting at home and saying, what are we doing in our localities? So we have multi-scalar, multi, and transdisciplinary projects, and I will give you examples of some of those, and they cover ECD to university. The idea is that in a hyper-local engagement is that you upscale successful projects using lessons learned in that involvement and also comparable international context. Now, in terms of the educational pipelines, I think Professor Bawa talked about my involvement in student success. And I want to just give you a sense of how we rationalized going back to ECD. We believe that or backwards articulation, we believe that the development of successful graduates starts with a solid foundation from early childhood to university. I don't need to talk about early childhood, the challenges in our country. And we do believe that we have compounded educational problems that could manifest in poor university performance if they even get there. And then sustainability, this is something I'm very passionate about. I think sustainability of student success programs at universities is dependent on correcting educational pipeline problems, not just as university. I think we start far too late. I don't want to belabor the performance of our education system is well known. I'll just make an example. The matric pass rate has been over 70%. We celebrate that, but the real pass rate we know over 2017, 19, and 20 is in the region of 40%. 1 million students, if you take of 2017, 1 million grade 1 students, only about 630,000 actually wrote the final matric examination. There's the perennial mathematics problem, the perennial, English first language problem, and fewer children taking mathematics and science has been with us for a long time. Now, here is part of the baseline data I'm talking about. Before we engage with educational pipelines problems, you really have to know your community. Where are they? So this is the baseline data we got from Stats. They say these are all statistics. Please don't hold me to this. I'm just giving you an idea of what it is. So we need to know how many, what part of the population knows schooling, primary school, completed primary, some secondary, grade 12, and so on. So the idea is that if this baseline data is, say, from 2015, 2012, whatever, I think it was 2012, what would be the target in 2030 from the time you start? So that's in the ideal world, but you need to have a data approach to do that. In terms of, the initiative on economic development, you look at, how many people are employed, unemployed, discouraged, work seeker, not economically active, and so on. Then let me look at the networks in the educational pathways. We have an ECD network, primary school network, high school tertiary interface, and an umbrella network. I operate on the high school tertiary interface, but I'll give you an idea on what this network, the ECD and the high school do. I won't talk about all of them. So in each network, the academic staff, undergraduate and postgraduate students, ECD teachers, in this case, parents, government departments, funders, international partners, NGOs. The primary network will have all the above, psychology clinic included, and occupational therapy. And the next one will be TVETs involved, schools, DBE, and so on, depending on the network. That's just a pictorial ECD's primary schools. And we have our extended curriculum programs. The students that do not succeed there they can go to other institutional types. That's important for us. We are aware as a university that our criteria may not be, our admission criteria may not be accessible to all, everybody. In any case, not every child has to go to university, so we give them options. Student involvement, I've talked about. We had 10 students involved in different disciplines before COVID struck. Undergraduate students, 6 faculties, 40 community partners. I've talked about TVETs, 5 ECDs, several primary schools. We also have, we had fortunate to have USAid fellows in 2018, and the Fulbright scholars that come to visit UP often volunteer in Mamelodi. We have 1 now. There is a pictorial of the collaborative, that is Mamelodi, the University of Pretoria involvement across all faculties, most faculties, let me put it that way, international partners, education partners, City of Tshwane, we get involved, the politics has made it difficult recently, and then government departments. Then here's an example, what do they do in the ECD network? BCom students, for example, in our foundation program, when they are doing business management plans, a business plan, for example, being taught how to develop those become concrete, and they actually help a specific ECD in the community that can use that business plan. We had a food garden before COVID struck again, and the produce there went to ECD centers, and there was small business training involved. Department of Architecture has been very good, in supporting us, looking at spatial constraints in the ECD. And then very importantly, the campus spatial plan, softening the border between the campus and the community. I think the contradiction with our campus was that we were so barricaded, yet we were serving the community, and the idea was to have a soft border and closer, community affinity, as it were, of course, taking into account the security. The health sciences, family medicine looked at improved assessments of the children, and then the curriculum, of course, from education faculty, and the biggest problem, untrained ECD providers. Then I'm going to talk about example 2 a little bit in detail. I won't cover everything, it's quite involved. So it's academic enrichment, which I think most of us are involved, are aware of, and it's in STEAM. We're moving from STEM to STEAM, which the A is the arts. Tertiary going culture remains a perennial problem in our country. Conceptual learning doesn't happen much in schools, and that's why we have student success problems at university. For as long as there's procedural learning and we are so focused on the matrix at NSC, I think our student success will be challenged. Data-driven, I'm very, unless you can measure it, and I'm not glued to figures only. I also, qualitative is important. And one of the things we've realized is quality assurance in some of these programs is never on the radar of people, NGOs and so on. We pride ourselves by saying that whatever is taught to the children, just because the education system is failing us, nobody really has a right to teach anything they believe they can teach. We do have to have quality assurance. They are our partners. Then those are the student statistics. They are not very huge, 1,000 students from first year to grade 8 to first year, 20,000 together with our partners. The idea here is the hyper-local engagement. What can you do with those students that you can upscale? We offer after school, winter and Saturday and online programs, career fairs, science and art clubs and so on, in mathematics, physical sciences and so on. These are not, we are starting philosophy next year, which will be very interesting. Facilities available to learners, computer laboratories, something as basic as Gmail accounts, which you take for granted. These children did not have. Physical and biological sciences lab, the US Embassy, we have a Mae Jemison Science Reading Room. Our own library, there's a reading space and corner for our pre-university students. Of course, they use the lecture halls and the sports facilities. So that is I'll show you a few pictures which do not give a close-up shot of the children because of the Popeye Act. There is, learners in the lecture room in group work, and our BSc and BCom students are volunteering to help them in their homework program. Here they are at the corner, which is, reserved for them in our library. Of course, we have a corner for extended curriculum programs who are university students. This is our newsletter. I can't give you a close-up also of any other, pictures, but that shows you a sense of the numbers that were in one of the career fairs. We have a presence in the, social media. You can check us up there in terms of our Facebook, YouTube channel, and also, of course, the website. Special projects, I've already talked about homework projects. They'd love to show you the award ceremony, but I can't because of the Popeye Act. Mathematical modeling, also we do it in, with a Fulbright fellow, and then a holistic development cycling club, which we work with Mamelodi Cycling Club for girls, and we use cycling to teach science concepts. Here's the learner narratives. I came for friends, food, education, and that feeling of being at university is really important for children to really step on university ground, so to speak. This student went on to go into engineering. I think he must be finishing now. And then after the first lessons, my mother was happy because unlike other programs, there was interaction. This is key. And this is one of the problems because of the numbers in our schools. My twin brother also came along and his marks improved drastically. We do have challenges sometimes, at least at the beginning when, a child will be enrolled and they bring another one and we can't turn them away. Results for the 29 cohort, I'm just going to show you physical science. Over 53% obtained over 40%, 29% obtained over 80%, and nationally, about 25% by comparison obtain over 40%. And a significant one student obtained 98 in maths and 100% in physical science. I'm not really into matrix. I think they follow once conceptual learning happens, but they are important, they're a reality of life. Scaling to district level in 2022, we are launching this project on a bigger scale. We are launching a pre-university academy, which will be based, which will now extend beyond Mamelodi. And we will be working with, we will be working with the Tshwane South, Tshwane North, and Tshwane West. To date, we have been working with Tshwane South only in Mamelodi. That's the Mamelodi Circuit, Tshwane South District. My apologies. So we now have many more schools. We try to include as many quintile profiles as possible. And we are now shifting our anchoring to both Mamelodi and Hatfield in terms of educational pathways. We can go national, global, continental, but we want to do it systematically and also try to start from home, which is a big problem in education is. There are some of the recent publications. I just want to draw attention to this particular publication, which might be of interest to most of the people here because it's a case study, or it's case studies of different South African universities on community engagement. The publisher is Van Skyke and it's going to come out in 3 weeks' time. And the editor is Professor Ilof from UP and her colleagues. That's one, there are a few of them. I think I rushed through and I will take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nthabiseng. That was a wonderful presentation as well, and just covered all the bases. And I think that it really provides us with a wonderful picture of what's going on at UP. So we'll pick up the questions at the end of the session, and if that's okay with you. And now I'm going to turn to Larry Pokpas. He's an institutional planner and executive assistant to Professor Tyrone Pretorius at University of the Western Cape, also known as University of the West Working Class. He obtained his undergraduate and postgraduate qualifications from that same university, and he has a teacher's diploma from the erstwhile Belleville College of Education. He's the founding director of the institutional planning in 1998, and and I think that he arrived in that post just at the time when University of the Western Cape found itself in very difficult financial and legitimacy kind of challenges, if you like. And he was very much at the center of trying to understand how to address those issues. He's a co-editor of a book which was released quite recently, From Hope to Action Through Knowledge, The Renaissance of the University of the Western Cape, 2001 to 2014. And as far as I can remember, Larry, I think this was the first book published by with the University of the Western Cape Press imprint, I think. I think that's correct. You might have to correct me on that. But thank you for agreeing to be on this panel and on this session. And over to you. Thank you so much.
Professor Bawa, thank you. And good afternoon to all. And thanks to the organizers for arranging this important conference to speak on a topic that's close to our hearts. The topic of this, or the title of this presentation, is Connecting Possibilities in Anchoring Places. And I'm going to speak about this topic around 5 key points and use 3 examples of the institution's approach to explore some of these possibilities. So just as an introduction, I've got 2 slides on the introduction. Engagement and the anchor mission for the institution is a way of building a sense of a future, so that whatever we do is not in vain. It is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. At the University of the Western Cape, we call it UWC. Engagement is integral to the ethos of the institution. And therefore, I can't give you, if I give you examples, there are too many because engagement efforts abound, formal and informal, within the institution, often leading to rising expectations. But for purposes of today's conversation, the anchor mission is a complementary subset of this engagement ethos of the institution. But in exploring and acknowledging the important work that our academics and others are doing, it does raise a challenge to the institution as to how to realistically lend thoughtful and structural support to deepen our understandings of engagement, to accelerate action to redress some of the disparities of our country, to reap transformative benefits of these multiple efforts on a university-wide scale. So I want to come back to this important issue of raising expectations of a future that is not in vain. And in doing so, I'd like the audience to just look at the image on this slide. And I want to talk about the story of the Choluteca Bridge in Honduras, designed to withstand the strongest hurricane. But in 1998, the Hurricane Mitch permanently changed the course of the river from here to there, rendering the bridge essentially, that's firmly anchored, essentially useless. I want to leave you with this image and come back to it right at the end. Because if you think about not the bridge as the one in Honduras, but as our institutions firmly anchored in our localities, to what extent, amidst all the challenges that we are facing and the storms that we are facing, to what extent allows that us to either cause a responsiveness and engagement with our surroundings, or whether that causes a disconnect, a disengagement, and a sense of apathy and numbness. And I'd like to leave you with that. Think of your own institution, because that's part of the challenge that we at the UWC is grappling with. So just secondly, about the context of the institution. Of the institution. Today is the 90th birthday of our former Chancellor, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. You would probably like what I'm going to say about the story of UWC as a story of optimism and agency. Some people would probably prefer to say a story of struggle. But it's about seeing the untapped potential and how to unlock it. The university was founded in 1960 as an apartheid creation to address low-level training needs for the segregated civil service. There was not really high expectations of the institution. But when it gained autonomy in the 90s, it repudiated and rejected the ideological grounds on which it was founded, and effectively became an agent of transformation, attracting expats, activists, and energy from all over the country in a very centripetal way to explore the possibilities of a democracy. And it became the intellectual home of the democratic left. This is the place where parts of the constitution was crafted. This is the place where the constitutional models, the way in which our parliament, our systems work at the moment, have been debated, etc., in the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately, the dawn of democracy in 1994 was the worst experience, in a sense, almost like that image of the bridge, creating a storm for the institution where we lost all our senior staff, students, and key individuals to government, to cabinet, to state departments, etc. And to a large extent, we had to rebuild the capabilities over an extended period. The university has remarkably recovered. And what you see on the right are two books, The Dynamics of Building a Better Society, that's part of our engagement, as well as a story of becoming UWC. And in becoming UWC, we are drawing on that proud historical mission, but we are challenged to reimagine the role of the university's future, but this time different in its evolution. So if you want to know slightly more about the institution, there is a chapter entitled Educating Towards and for a Changed Society in Chris Brink's book to be launched, which encapsulates UWC's emerging sense of itself. Nasima Bacha, Louise Dippenaar, and I tried to, in this chapter, to give some notions of the university's ethos of engagement to enhance and not detract from the validity of the academic work. It actually explains multiple responsiveness to help negotiate institutions to deal with the inherent tensions and paradoxes that we deal with as a society. And it helps our staff to embed a culture of sense-making of why we make some decisions, either in favor or not of the things that we want to achieve. They give a number of examples within that of the public health activism. There's an interesting story about dentistry and the kind of racial stereotypes that our dentistry, located in Mitchell's Plain, is trying to deal with the racial stereotypes of the indentureless populations of the Western Cape, which obviously for many people is a jokingly reference. There's the importance of community health and human rights and women's rights and children's rights, etc. And all of these are firmly grounded in community activities. There's the work of PLAS and land reform and the plight of farm workers, the conditions. And a very important part about the humanities and its inspiring role that it gives an intellectual identity of the institution, but also to help us reimagine. All of this seeks to remind us to hold on to the transformative potential of what engagement and anchor institutions want to achieve. So just briefly, thirdly, about notions of anchor institutions. As universities are seen as place-based organizations, often sticky institutions, they're deeply rooted in their local geographies. They play a key role in the social and the economic revitalization of their surroundings. And to some extent, they simultaneously should achieve some shared values. This is not about what's in it for me as an institution, but what's in it for all. So there needs to be some community benefit. And our approach to the anchor institution is more of a methodical approach, saying that this is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. Maybe just a reminder of some important characteristics of anchor institutions, drawing from literature, with spatial mobility. And here I need to just flag that the space-based connections doesn't mean that we are trapped in our apartheid-based settings. This is about, it has to be about spatial transformation too. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's, another trait is the corporate status of institutions, which means the constitutional status or their mandates and their intellectual ability to influence and to have an impact. We're also called anchor institutions because of the size of the institutions in a local setting, the number of land holdings, the number of staff and students, the purchasing power, the procurement power, etc. And an important element of this, which some literature suggests is not essential, is the mission alignment, that there needs to be a firm commitment to greater purposes, to the public good, to issues of social justice, of human rights, of democracy, etc. So now let me just delve into the specific examples that I want to flag. And just to give you a sense, here's South Africa. I hope you can see my pointer. South Africa University being located in broader Cape Town metropolitan area. And for those who know Cape Town, you probably think of the more tourist notions of Cape Town. So let me just locate the university within the Western Cape, as this is the Cape Town metropolitan area. And over 60% of the entire provincial population stays in the metropole. The red dot suggests where UWC is. That's where the let's say the waterfront and the CBD of Cape Town is. And just for direction purposes, the University of Stellenbosch should probably be where the pointer is now. So the university is located in the geographic center of the metropole. It's equidistant from Cape Town as it is to Stellenbosch. You'll see that it's closer to the Stellenbosch winelands. So the key point about this is that as part of apartheid spatial planning, the university is located on the Cape Flats in very sterile and very uninviting landscapes reminding of the apartheid forced removals. So what we're talking about today is how the university, given the scale of the environment, needs to consider collaborative infrastructure and has to make some wise choices as whether it wants to operate at the metropolitan level, which is the entire metro, whether it wants to operate at the corridor level, which is a corridor, the so-called Voortrekker corridor, from Cape Town to other areas, whether it wants to operate at precinct level and. So take that same image, and there's the University of Cape Town. So the University of the Western Cape is located where the cursor is now. And I'm going to speak to 3 examples in the next 3 slides. One, trying to locate the institution very close to the heart, to the CBD of Cape Town. Secondly, to locate the university in the Bellville area. And thirdly, to expand the campus into community networks and a neighborhood. So let me get to the first example. The university, as I said, is located in Bellville. It's located in, but not perceived to be of the area. Students find it very alienating. And so the first challenge that the institution had was to explore the relocation of some parts of the institution into the Bellville CBD as a catalyst for urban revitalization. In a sense, we're saying that the fate of the institution is closely tied to the health and the well-being of its surroundings. Bellville is the second node of Cape Town. In a sense, it's the second city, if you wish. It has the second biggest station. It has the biggest interface of people moving in around. And we decided to consciously anchor 4 health departments in this node. And what you see on the left is a former hospital that we repurposed, and the entire precinct, and in order to stimulate a rundown CBD. Think of this area as kind of the hillbrow of Cape Town. The purpose of this was triggered to attract private investment, particularly to diversify the land use and to create a sense of conviviality and a sense of place. It's a place, it's kind of a place marked by, to some extent, placelessness. And part of the challenge of the institution here is to understand the interests and influences of other stakeholders, and also to understand the needs and aspirations of the community in that area. The second example is next to the institution. So on this image, the university would be located in the far left corner of where the cursor is now, with a railway line. And next to the campus, immediately next to the campus in Belha, was about 30 hectares of unused barren land that for the last 60 years have not been used. It's state-owned land. And what the university with other stakeholders have been engaging with is to acquire part of the land, to swap the land with provincial government, a very protracted process that gave us a sense of how difficult it is to work with different spheres of government. But in essence, our students are expected, we only host about 12% of our students in residences at the moment. And all our other students have to commute with very poor public transport and spend many hours. So this initiative will integrate about 2,700 beds and a new sports precinct within this very dense precinct, where a regional hospital will also be built. The key challenge here is that an institution that didn't have a neighbor for a very long time suddenly will have a very dense neighborhood of about 16,000 residents on about 20 hectares of land. So how do we generate shared value, community, university value out of this? A sense of public safety, a sense of managing this, and how do we collaborate with different spheres of government for greater impact? And the challenge here is that often housing developments are built and the developers move away. And so how does one engage with the different stakeholders? What you have here is just different pockets with different income levels, of which the campus would be there, and these are 3 parts of where the university is located. The third and last example is an example of the university co-locating some of its Center of Humanities activities close to Cape Town CBD in an area called Woodstock, which is a cultural precinct. And the purpose here is the anchoring of less recognized cultural systems like community art, where we work with urban and rural arts, community arts projects, and find a way to give recognition to these. So what we did here was an ethical upgrade and reuse of an abandoned heritage site that is in an area plagued by gentrification. The university will have a laboratory of connecting objects. It will have a number of community artists and artists in residence, and they collectively will connect the humanities scholarship with the production of arts practices. And in this case, we'll work with museums like the Zuid-Mokka Museum, where we have students and scholars jointly hosted by us, working with them in order to create cultural imaginaries, to bring some vitality and intellectual stimulation to an institution that does not offer any programs in performing arts. An interesting example of the rural-urban partnership here, and these are examples of work done by our artists in residence with the community in Barrydale, which is about just 2.5 hours away from the campus, in a rural area where they use a community art puppetry and have an annual festival. And from that area in Barrydale, 55 young people who never, of that community, who never thought of thinking about entering higher education, came to the university for study. The area is located, there's Devil's Peak on that side, so that gives you a sense of how close this is to Cape Town CBD. So these are the 3 examples. What are we learning from this? We're learning that these examples and many others indicate that anchoring initiatives are contextually different, so there's no one size fit all. We also learned that it's very messy, and because of the fragmented policy environments and our different tiers or spheres of government at national, provincial, and local level, that is very hard, and we'll have to find ways, and maybe the district development model will assist with that. We also learned that we have the ability to influence for placemaking and to help reshape the identities of our localities and the impact that it might have. We also learned from these exercises that this is not in for a short stint. You have to be in for the long haul to sustain collaborative capacities for long-term impact. And more importantly, we need to find ways to create a framework growing out of this to guide our implementation and to measure the rigor and the standards and the comparability of these anchor strategies. So in conclusion, I think going back to that image of the bridge, we are called on to seize the transformative potential of engagement and transformative opportunities of anchor missions to forge meaningful and impactful university community relations, to help build an inspiring sense of our collective future. We can easily fall into despair, but I think anchor institutions offer a remarkable opportunity to unlock the potential of what we're collectively trying to achieve as a higher education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larry. And that was, again, another fascinating kind of picture of how yet another institution sort of is addressing the issue of engagement and using sort of the philosophy of an anchor institution approach, if you like, to define the way in which it moves ahead. There are a number of questions in the chat box, and I'm going to sort of run through them. And just to ask each of you to kind of also pick up, comments that you'd like to make on each other's presentation. So please feel free to come in on that as well. And I'd like to thank the participants who put in those questions. Some of them are really interesting. Professor Moyo, the first one is really aimed at you. You indicated that some staff do not even engage internally. So the question is, does this speak to a general academic culture of disengagement? I don't know whether you would like to respond to that.
Yes, maybe I can say a few words with that one, just to say that I don't think one could say it's a culture of academic disengagement. You could say to some extent, but often, I mean, what you find is that institutions, because of their nature, they are very big, first of all, to start off. And people just continue doing what they do. So if one does not create opportunities for these different teams to meet, then it's possible for people to just continue for years. And I know, like some institutions, if I look like ours, for example, we don't have things like, staff cafeteria where people could come and chat. And that's why these days you find even in libraries or other spaces, you create these spaces where people can just come, to chat about, what are you doing, which department do you belong to? You just have some kind of interaction. But I think that in general, it's just the nature of the institutions. Departments stay where they stay, and nobody really goes out of those boundaries. So I think it's an area which also one needs to look at when we talk about, engagement, even within the institution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that what you're really saying is that you have to, universities have to create the space for individuals to become involved and to kind of build a culture of engagement, if you like, through that kind of intervention. There's a general question, which is, what about those communities that are not linked, right, to the universities, that are not in the space of universities, if you like? And I suspect that part of that issue is really about just the fact that anchor institutions might actually respond not just to the immediate local context, but also to kind of the provincial context, working with these. But let me just turn to Professor Ogude first. Would you like to respond to that, Nthabiseng?
Yes, I can. I think if one takes South Africa, for example, I think we have, 70 plus districts. And if you look at our universities, I haven't seen a pictorial of this or anything like that. I think if you map them, some will be in particular districts, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole people to do work only in those districts. We are global universities. But what I'm saying is, I believe the coverage, of the country would be very good with the institutions. And like you say, I mean, even though we are in Mamelodi, no university is that hyper local. We are now expanding to different, different circuits, if you wish, of schools in the Tshwane South, and also, to Tshwane North and so on. So you can keep on expanding and so on. So I don't think there are any, communities that are unreachable. There is, of course, one has to be realistic. If I'm thinking of the example I gave in terms of the schools, there are far-flung schools. And the only model is not just the physical face-to-face, and transport can be a problem. But I think you can be innovative and find ways of involving communities. It's going to be hard, but it can be done.
Thank you very much. Larry, would you like to respond to that?
Is it to the question, to the one in the chat, or which one is it?
Yeah, the one it's about saying, not all communities are linked to universities.
Okay. Yeah. Well, keep in mind that we're making a distinction between the engagement notion and the specific place-based element to it. Because
Larry,
in the
switch your video on, please, Larry.
we're trying to make a distinction between the place-based element and the general engagement ethos of the institution. So our students and staff are engaged with communities all over, be that in Cape Town, in the rural areas, and elsewhere in the Eastern Province, etc. So those things abound, and the university will continue to do that and allow those to happen. So this is not about that. But when one looks to limited resources and finding a way of the institution also contributing itself to the transformation of some of its areas and its communities, that it explores a more focused approach to some of these activities, but its benefit would be to the broader community. So the issues that we're dealing with are not just for that, but also create models of how to achieve that in other areas. So this is not about physical location only. It is about the influence of the institution and its intellectual capital for a broader community and not just for the ones surrounding the institution.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. Sibu, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, so maybe I can just add, I think Larry has touched on that already to some extent, and also Prof. Ogude. So I think that in our case, what we also notice is that it's just much easier, and comfortable, because we are a city university, in one part, and we have the other part in Midlands. So it's easier for people to work around the community, around the city. But we set an agenda where we decided, for example, the school engagement program, that, now we really want to go to the areas which need help. And usually these are rural settings. We ran across different challenges, because I know that in one of the cases, we had some, riots going on, and then our students with the bus, whatever it was, they couldn't come out for a week or two, actually, in that region. But the people did help to, the local police helped to look after them. So to some extent, I think that, it's also sometimes, asking this question about the safety and how accessible some of our communities are. And when you come to that point, to realize that work with the local people, they do help. I mean, we had to reach out to the provincial government so that, we are now able to time our access to those communities. But I think it's important to, like you said, to map out the area you are in and to ask yourself, if you are located in this area, but where's the need most? Most of those schools in the community need more help. The one school, for instance, I mean, I remember some of the schools where, the students, when they want to apply to university, the teacher practically waits on her mobile and helps one student at a time. So you can imagine how many are possible to go through that route in a day. So, some of these schools, the students have the ability, but I think the resourcing is not equal. And so we need to make a deliberate decision as universities to really look at where we are, and then to map out the areas that might need more help in terms of, the STEAM areas as well, trying to get support in the necessary areas, and experiments. I mean, some of these involve like mobile labs. We carry the chemistry laboratory experiments, drive to the school so that, during the grade 12 period, a certain period, people can do these experiments and then drive back with a group of students. So there are all these practicalities, but I think the idea of having these anchor institutions where you actually have a base in that community could help a lot. But those communities also have to have buy-in in order to protect, whatever it is that you set up in that area.
Thank you. There's a second set of questions which relate to the funding of community engagement, and I think that this is of course a problem that goes back many years, and so just the extent to which we depend on kind of soft money, if you like, raised money for community engagement. Can I ask, how are your institutions kind of dealing with this? And so let me again just let me start with Larry.
I think that's a very important and critical question, that most of the engagement activities are grant funded, and often depends on the sustainability of those grants, and very often it's grant to grant projects. And when the grants come to an end, these projects are often also sometimes come to an end. So I think the important question that I started up front was to ask the question, in the context of these things abounding, in the institution, how do we lend very systematic structural support to the efforts? And in other words, how do we pool our resources to make some things more sustainable than others? And in this case, the purpose of the anchor approach, as opposed to the general engagement approach, is to pool university resources and attract some of the projects into an infrastructure that is funded and supported by the institution. And so all of these examples require huge infrastructural investment, collaborative support, the coordinating support, the engagements with external role players, and huge funds go into these activities. So in this sense, we are pooling the resources to make a more thoughtful investment into the anchor strategy. Hopefully that will be more enduring, more durable, and not dependent on the whims of funders. To a large extent, we're also pooling the support that the department is giving for infrastructure, for other grants like clinical training and other grants. Pool all of these into those areas to fund the infrastructure, but not exclusively for those communities. Like mobile labs, if invested for that purpose, will be used more broadly for other areas. Thank you.
Very much. There's an interesting point in the chat which which I also subscribe to, and that is not to think of engagement as a third kind of pillar, if you like, but rather think about engagement as being infused into research and teaching and learning, and therefore to have them funded, have engagement funded on the basis of of the subsidy system, basically, and the general kind of funding system at the university. I don't know if there's been any thinking along those lines, Sibu, and let's start with Sibu.
Oh, yes. Okay. So yeah, you're right. I think you're right about that, about, trying to, so at DUT, and maybe it's because of your influence partly, we think of engagement actually as being, in everything we do, whether it's teaching, learning, research, and also when you're applying for grants, we really want you to talk about, how are you going, for example, think about the sustainability of that initiative, who are the key players that you're bringing to the table. I think that is important, but to some extent, yes, there's a percentage that is funded by the university, but we also encourage, the, like in the communities where we go, we also look for, like, people are already working in that area, if it's NGOs or other partners, so that we come together. And sometimes we actually force the department, especially if it's the Department of Basic Education, to actually say, look, this is also in your interest, and let's see how we can work together, to pool resources. But I think the forecast sustainability planning is key, and also embedding that engagement in both activities. I mean, we see engagement as something also which can help us raise state stream income. So when we are applying for grants, for fundraising, everything about, our engagement, about research, teaching and learning outcomes will be part of that proposal that we put together. So we are building that. I mean, it's not very easy, that not everybody does that, but it's something which we are also working towards in general. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Nthabiseng, any kind of thoughts on that matter?
I think the notion of, community engagement being a separate pillar from teaching and learning is not sustainable on its own. I really think that it's very difficult for me to even think about community engagement as separate, but I know the problem. And just picking up from what Professor Moyo is saying, and giving the example of Mamelodi, I mean, what we are doing is research. And, you can't approach community engagement as a voluntary or, some haphazard way of just helping the community. If you are a university, you should always be cognizant of, you've got to do, I mean, there's got to be scholarship involved. There's just no way. And if you look at, the students that assist us in the community engagement, many are postgraduate students.
Mm-hmm.
So, by conceptualizing community engagement in this manner, you also deal with the funding. So there is no way you're going to change a community with funding from externally. And I think, like Larry said, you have to pool all the resources, firstly within the university. There's a lot of dispersed, institutional resources that could be used much more, in a focused manner. And then, of course, with your partners. And they, the university shouldn't go out there. It should be a real partnership. If you give the impression that you have all the resources that are available, you cannot make it. And then, of course, funders and so on. So it's for the long haul. I think Larry said so, maybe not in those terms, but it's not something that will be solved in our lifetime. We just have to start and, make sure it's undergirded by scholarship.
So I think that it's been a fascinating session. The additional point, I suppose, in terms of funding is that, all the recent kind of analyses indicate that that the spending on research and development by local government and provincial government is extraordinarily low. So that's one of the, I think, avenues that we have to explore. I think your point, Nthabiseng, that these have to be genuine partnerships, also means that we have to change the culture of our provincial and local governments, around investing in the kind of work that universities do. So that's something I think that we have to follow up on. And I think that the other really major point that arose in this session is the importance of ensuring that universities create the kind of the structures and so on that facilitate this kind of engagement. And I think that that's also critically important. So I think just to round up the session, I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to make any final comments. Let me start with Larry this time.
Thanks, Ahmed. I think the one area that we haven't fully explored is to think of universities as our role in engagement, as opposed to the huge potential that the different spheres of government, private and other investors have in the shared vision. And we have a responsibility to find a way to build that shared vision so that we collectively contribute and invest, and not to make this the onus and responsibilities solely of universities. We have a core mandate. We understand that core mandate includes as an integral part engagement, and therefore it's not a third leg or third strand of the institution, but we haven't really tapped into the huge resources that's often wasted if it's not invested in a long-term vision of what we want to collectively achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. That's an excellent point. I'm going to turn now to Sibu.
Thank you so much, Prof. Bawa. So for me, I think it's been a very interesting engagement, really, and I should thank the participants for the questions as well. And I believe that, yeah, there's still a lot, that we could do on our side as the higher education sector, just looking at, sustainability models where we fund engagement as part of, the core operations of the university and not as a side event, but also having, the people who can support those interactions, because I believe it's not all universities that might have a very, suitable structures to expand into areas beyond the boundaries of the university where they find themselves, to go in other areas where the help is really needed. And I think just the thoughts you also gave us, thinking about, how we make sure that we are reaching out to those societies that might really need the help as well. And I think the other point you raised yesterday, which also I think I tried to touch on a bit today, is the idea of, using this as also a way to raise, potential friends of the university, but as a sustainability model, which will give us students who can access the system. They don't have to all come to our university, but preparing them also for entry streams to other sectors in the higher education sector. So I think, it's been a useful discussion, and thank you very much. A lot to take away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Nthabiseng, last word to you.
Let me put my video. It's not going on now.
It's on. We can see you.
Is it on?
We can see
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, one of the crucial things that we have to grapple with as a higher education sector, if I could limit it to that, is just making a distinction between the traditional way we've done, community engagement, where our communities actually remained disengaged, from the work that we are actually doing. And it was really, predicated on us placing students for, to get some credit bearing, some credits for professional, courses and so on. And the assistance to the community was more of a spin-off or a byproduct of what the university is doing. So I don't think we are at a stage where we've really said, how does the anchor institution notion sit side by side by the community engagement notion, and really try to unpack that and have clarity in our discussions about what we're talking about. But otherwise, thank you for the engagement. Thank you to my fellow panel members. And thank you, Ahmed, for this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a really interesting session. And by the way, there's the wonderful thing is just the diversity of kind of approaches amongst the three institutions. And I'm pretty sure if we look at all 26 universities, we'll find different pictures emerging. And Nthabiseng, the one point you made was just the location of our three universities across our 26 universities across the country. We also have to remember, that we have 100 campuses of the TVT colleges. So if we start thinking in much broader terms around, bringing the post-school education and training sector to play, then we have a truly kind of substantial coverage. But let me say thank you to the three of you for your wonderful presentations, and thank you to the participants, the audience, and thank you to the CHE for helping us to pull this together. It's been a really interesting session. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.